I'm Landan Matriano Lim. I just raced in the F4 US Championship, and this is Turn 1 Podcast.
Welcome to Turn 1, a Formula One podcast. Now entering the grid. Here are your hosts, Thomas and Jeremiah.
Welcome to Turn 1. We're your hosts, Thomas.
And Jeremiah.
And like you heard in our open today, we are joined by Mr. Landan Lim.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Who is a professional racing driver.
I try to be.
So we want to cover quite a bit on this show, but it is casual conversation. It's, no pressure. But basically, we want to go through your career, but you've had a unique kind of representation of what pro driving can be because you didn't come into it through the normal kind of facets or pathways, if you want to say. And so we want to get into some of that. But I first want to start with how me and you got connected, which was highly coincidental. So over the past couple of years, what have you just finished doing? What's your big achievement in the past couple of years?
So one of the big achievements I've had is I just graduated college in 3 years with a double major. So absolutely ran through that. I'm not a big fan of school, so just wanted to get through it, but that also allows me to focus on my racing career now.
Absolutely.
So deal with my parents was finish college first, get your education, then we'll let you have some fun in a race car.
And if you missed that, he double majored in 3 years. He went to Louisiana State University at Shreveport.
Correct.
And the way that we got connected is that's where I'm getting my master's degree. And I saw on LinkedIn that LSUS had posted an article about you just kind of going over what you had just stated, which is, hey, I went to school, double majored. I also started a Formula 4 career. I got into some other series as well. And they wrote a whole nice article on you. And I saw that popped up on my LinkedIn feed. And I was like, I have to reach out to Landan. I've got to talk to this guy. And so we got connected, I think, on Instagram.
I think it was Instagram, yeah.
And then you sent me your phone number. And Landon's been just an absolute, nicest guy I think we've ever worked with or talked to. And so he was super inviting. And so we wanted to have him on the podcast just to talk about his career and where he's been.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about race Sunday, paper due by 11:59.
Absolutely. Scrambling to get that work done on the timer.
We were talking earlier to Landon. Where was it that you were taking some of your final exams?
I was at a test day at Mid-Ohio for Formula 4, and I had my last assignment due for college ever, so I was absolutely pumped because finished the assignment at probably 11 o'clock at night, I'd say again. And then got to hop in a race car the next day. Couldn't ask for a better celebration than that.
Did you at least get the instant grade back on it? Was it one of those online ones where it instantly grades it and gives it back?
It was. So it was almost one of those Google form looking assignments.
So he's not going into the race thinking, oh, I don't know how I did on that assignment.
He gets the 95 back. Is sweet, and I get to go kill it on the track tomorrow. That was extremely fascinating to read about, but I think what's even more so not only did you do the college double major 3-year and start a career, but before that you had a 10-plus year gymnastics career, right? Can you take us through kind of where did you start getting to sports? Where did your love for gymnastics come from? And then we'll switch into how that translated to a race career.
Yeah, so actually my mom put my older sister in the little kids gymnastics classes just to get her socially interactive before school because my older sister, when she was little, was very timid and almost scared of other little kids. It was kind of interesting. But so whenever my parents found out that they could put us in that so young, I started at 18 months, just in the little classes where, parents lead their kids around the gym and they kind of do stuff together. So as I never got away from it as soon as I was introduced. And when I was 6 years old is when I started competing gymnastics. So that's when it really took off, and I was a very competitive person, spirit. And so I dedicated my time to that. We worked out 20 hours a week. So that definitely helps with the physical aspect before coming into a race car, already being used to working out so much. So competitive spirit from that, working out so much, it's really set me up pretty well for that.
What was kind of your like highest level of competing in gymnastics?
So I was the highest level 10 for my final, I believe it was 2 years of competition. And actually my gymnastics career ended because of COVID-19. Senior year, packed up bags in the car for state competition. And we get a call and state meets canceled for COVID, or postponed actually. But then, of course, just like the 2-week break turned into 2 years.
Oh my gosh.
State competition never happened, and that was the end of my gymnastics career. So,
what a horrible way to finish, man. That sucks.
And especially because, like he mentioned, you train 20 hours a week. You've been doing this for years and years and years. This is kind of the big build-up. You know, you're kind of reaching a pinnacle of the sport, and then it just goes away. And again, You're right, because at first, everything was kind of postponed. I think my girlfriend, now wife at the time, was like, how long do you think all this lasts? I was like, 2 or 3 weeks, we'll be back.
Oh, yeah.
And then, like a year and a half later, it's like, oh, we're still in this.
Yeah.
And it's still shut down. So you did that, and then that was right before you had started college, right? Was when all that was senior year of high school?
Yep, senior year of high school. So I was the introduction into college while COVID really hit the high.
Yeah. And that's kind of what allowed you to do a little bit of the hybrid learning, I'm guessing?
Yeah, so that's when school switched to hybrid, so the in-person and online courses.
Okay. Where did the passion for racing come from? Did you have that while you were competing with gymnastics? Were you always kind of like looking like, one day I'd like to do a racing career? Or was it just overnight, I want to go do racing?
So I actually was not really involved in the racing world my entire life until about my senior year of high school. My dad got a sports car. Lotus Elise, and tiny little British car, absolute wonder to drive, lightweight, doesn't have much power, but man, you can fling that thing around corners. So he was having fun just driving it out on track days, and that was kind of a father and son thing we did whenever I was old enough and I got my license, so I could actually go and drive a car. So then I was like, hey Dad, I want to drive it on the racetrack too. So him and I would go do that on weekends, little father-son thing, and with that cars being out there on the track and getting introduced to it, really liked it, had a blast, and then realized, okay, I'm getting kind of fast. So then I wasn't in gymnastics anymore as well. So my competitive spirit didn't really have much to really go for until I got to the track. So it took off with that, and a couple years of just club racing with my dad. We bought me a race car to race in wheel to wheel in the club races. Did that for a couple years, and then the people that I was racing with, they were like, hey, you're young, you're fast, we love you, you should actually go take a shot at it. And that's what led me to throwing myself into Formula 4 for the U.S. Championship this year in 2023.
And where was that club racing, and what kind of car were you in?
It was club racing in the National Auto Sports Association. And we ran in New Orleans, Louisiana, and also Crescent, Texas, and Decatur, Texas as well. Okay. So we stayed pretty local in the Texas, Louisiana area.
So whereas most people, if they're going to be a pro racer, they start their career in karting, typically around 5, 6. You started actually going track days with your dad around a track in a Lotus. And that formed into you going quicker, getting into the league races there, and now you're moved into Formula 4. Exactly. So kind of take us through that transition as you moved from going just from a track car driver to moving into actual pro racing in Formula 4.
Absolutely world of change. Completely different field. Club racing, you have the variety of everyone, from other father-son duos to ex-pros who are just having fun in their old cars or something. So it had a really wide range, but still extremely competitive field, and everyone has that drive to do it. But changing into the Formula 4 scene really put into perspective what it takes to be a professional driver. I had no idea. These kids came from karting since they were 4 years old, where I wasn't even thinking about any motorized vehicle at that age. I'm playing in a little Tykes car, I guess. But
the little yellow roof.
Little Power Wheels John Deere tractor. Yeah.
So, I mean, it was a completely different level of competition, but hey, if I start late, it's fine. As long as I can prove that I have a place here, that's all that matters.
Tell us about the different feel between moving from the Lotus 2-seater cars like that to going into a single-seater Formula 4 feeder series car.
Formula cars are also completely different world. Feeling that wind rush against your helmet and being able to see your wheels turn and see your wheels hit the apex, totally different feel. It's pretty wild. But the Formula cars are much more reactive, I guess to say, because in a regular car, say you take a turn a little too fast, you know how everyone in the car leans over to the left and they kind of fall over a little bit. Well, in a Formula car, you feel that sideways force, but the second you turn that wheel, that car is pointing that direction. So it is something completely different to get used to. You don't have to wait for the car to lean, and then the weight's on the tires, and then you have grip. It is pretty much instantaneous.
What was it like whenever, so again, I want to say most people that are kind of in the career path that you're on, again, they start in the karting scene. When you showed up, you did the club scene down in New Orleans, and they gave you some encouragement. They said, hey, you can really do this. You're pretty fast at this. What was it like when you went to your first kind of either F4 event or any other race series where everybody that you've been around had been doing this since they were a little kid and you were the new guy? How did you figure out that dynamic of kind of getting into the culture that like super quick? How did you navigate that?
So coming into it, being with a team now going into professional series, they definitely help you get insight on, hey, like, this is how this works here as a professional scene, what we're doing, what's going on, how you act. I mean, obviously you don't change your personality, but there's a little more organization to it, that's for sure. But yeah, just people along the way that I've found that have been helpful, that have been around this scene a long time, they'll give you tips, and they want to see these young guys in these feeder series make it. So you ask around and they'll be very helpful. I've talked to some of like the people in the commentators booth that do the live broadcast for the races and stuff, and they'll give lots of insight and just response on, what to do, what to look for, and ask you how it's going.
I'm interested, before we get into like his last season doing F4 and then some of the other series that you've done, what's kind of you and your family's time commitment? And if you wanted to get into financial commitment, you can, but you don't have to. But what's like the time commitment and the effort level? How did you get mom and dad to sign off on you doing a racing career? Walk us through that kind of dynamic.
So I might have mentioned it earlier, I'm not sure, but the kind of deal with my parents was, they really focus on education. So as long as I got my college education, then I could go have fun playing in a race car.
Fair
so
enough.
I thought that was a pretty decent deal,
Yeah, that's all right.
So I rushed through college to get that deal in my
solidifies
actually
place.
there in my hands. So that was really good, and all thanks to them that I'm able to do this. So with the financial aspect, it is very crazy trying to get into professional series. You're always searching for sponsors. You're always trying to get some sort of backing because it is hard to make it. But if you're in it long enough, you've got the time, you've shown your place here, then that's when it starts to really come together.
Okay. And you've got two siblings, right? A older and younger sister.
I do. I'm the boy stuck right in the middle.
Do they come out to the races? Do they come out and watch you? Do they support you, cheer you on, anything like that?
They do. My older sister is very busy academically. She's in med school, so that takes up almost all of her time. But she's in New Orleans. So the first race of the season for Formula 4 and the Formula 3 series is in New Orleans. So stuff like that, she's able to come and support, and then my family does fly out with me to come watch the races when they can.
That's awesome.
And it's amazing having that support there.
That's super cool.
So I want to talk about your Formula 4 season real quick. 8 races, 64 overtakes.
64.
That's absolutely insane.
I put that car to work. If I was having a problem with the car and I didn't have the speed with the car, I'd at least put the work through the midfield, that's for sure.
See, I know that you're not going to say it, obviously rightfully so, but I'm going to say it. Maybe you might not have been in the best car on the grid, but you're definitely making up for it whenever you have 64 overtakes at the back of the field. You're making your way through. And, because of the car, maybe you get passed on the straight, but then to take it right back from them on the curves, that's crazy, man.
Exactly. That's what I suffered through at COTA, actually, was what you described. But, yeah, I think with the car's pace, it wasn't able to be a top 10 car.
Sure.
So I wasn't able to finish with any points. But with the Omologato Perfectly Timed Pass award, with the 64 passes at the end of the season, I think it actually was able to show that despite me not being able to make that top 10 finish, I was one of those drivers to pay attention to, because making a pass is one of the hardest things to do in racing.
Sure.
So I think it's one of my favorite accomplishments I've ever gotten. There's no doubt about that.
Can you put 64 overtakes into perspective? Like, what's normal? What are some of the other series doing in terms of overtakes over an 8-race season?
So actually, to put into perspective, so throughout the year in F4, there's about a 30-car field. Now, in F3, which was the series that ran with us, the step above us towards Formula 1, there was about 12, 15 cars. 12, I would say 12 cars running in the series. So 12 compared to 30. I ran 64 passes. The top F3 guy, he only got 17. I believe it was.
So 64 is a lot.
So quite a big jump from there.
Goodness. So you did an 8-race season. What were some of the highlights and what were some of the lowlights of the season? What stood out to you as a key moment, positive or negative?
So definitely finishing strong at the end of the year with that award. It's one of the strongest things I could have done. And I was a bit worried at the end of the year. So the last 3 races, I started to lose pace. I believe might have had some engine problems. I'm not sure. But at New Jersey was really hard. I was seconds off the pace, and I couldn't find the time, and I wasn't sure where. So that was very hard mentally to come back from, like to push myself through there, figure out, okay, well, if I don't have the pace, what can I do from that? And honestly, half of the time, especially in the F4 US Championship, half of the time is making it through the race. You make it through the race, you're going to make it up a good 5 places just from that.
Fair enough.
The consistency of staying on track, being a safe driver, was my big focus for New Jersey, since I did not have the pace. I wanted to make sure, okay, if I don't have the pace, I'm at least reliable. I'm going to make it through. I'm going to be consistent. I'm going to have the least tire wear so that I'm ready for the next races. So that's what I had to challenge myself through there. That was a very difficult time. But yeah, definitely a highlight with the passes at the end of the year, because I knew I put in the work, and it was hard to see it not show through the point standings. But I feel like that one really just brought it back.
And for our audience, which is mostly a Formula Series audience at this point, everybody's seen a driver that they know is like a top tier elite driver, and they're at a team that either that specific year their car is odd, for whatever. Look back to when Mercedes rolled out their zero pod design, and it was horrible, and their drivers were finishing 10, 11, 12, when we know those are top 5 drivers.
You still have a 7-time world champion, Lewis Hamilton.
And then you make that one adjustment to the car that takes it to the next level.
Yep.
And so that's kind of where you found yourself. Was there a moment in the season where, it was your first Formula 4 season, right?
Yes.
Was there a moment where you're like, this is a lot?
Man, I'll tell you right now, when I showed up to that first race and I got introduced to the pro scene, first session out, I was like, holy cow, what are these guys doing, man? Different outlook. But yeah, it's intense seeing just the difference in the introduction to it is a big shocker.
What is it like in your first race when you're staring? I don't know how they start in the Formula 4 series, but I'm assuming it's with the lights that are flashing and then it's go.
It sure
so
is.
What is it like when you're sitting in the engine, radio is silent, you see the lights counting down, your first race in a pro series? Tell me about that.
I will tell you, they do a practice start in one of the test sessions prior. So they do standing start, 5 red lights go on, and then they do lights out just like Formula 1. And the first practice start you do, I'll tell you, the only thing running through your head is don't stall. Don't stall. Don't stall. Just keep it running. So you are on that rev limiter making sure, okay, it's fine if I do a burnout. I just don't want to stall.
Sure.
Then I think the big part on any race start, I feel, as soon as you get into a pro series, is, okay, you've done this before. Don't worry about it. You know what to do. So you're almost just planning your move into turn 1. So you just got to have the confidence on the starts. I think on my first race start, I was a bit like, okay, don't stall. Or let's make a good reaction time. But at the same time, it was like, this is just the start. There is 15 more minutes, 30 more minutes in this race. I can make a move.
What was like the practice or training that you had prior to going into your first race? It couldn't have just been the practice races. What exposure did you have to the speed and the pace of the car leading up to that first race?
So with the club racing background, I'd already seen the race scene and kind of dealt with some wheel to wheel. And whenever I reached out to Jensen in December of 22, we went out for a test session in the F4 car in Houston. Well, first session out with my prior experience, he was like, all right, let's get you into the series. So I was not really too shocked, but all at the same time, like, wow, like, if he thinks right off the bat that I'm good enough, then I'm excited for it. So I want to get into it. But being into a formula car the first time, I'll tell you one of the weirdest things, laying down in the car. Have you seen how you sit in a formula car? Oh my
crazy.
gosh. You're basically like laying in bed watching TV is the angle you're sitting at.
So I know that y'all raced at COTA, correct?
Yes, final race of the season.
So I know that in Formula One, turn one is you have the giant hill climb, and then in the hairpin, is it the same? Y'all start at the same spot?
Yes, we sure do.
One of our favorite turn ones is COTA.
Yes.
So tell me about that hill climb right into that hairpin. I want to know what it feels like.
I will tell you right now, you've seen videos of it. If you haven't been to the track or even walked up that hill, it does not do justice. No video does justice to how steep that hill is. And then coming up to that blind hairpin at the top, terrifying. You see a storm of cars running up to that turn, and you have no idea if someone on the inside is going to lock it up and take 3 cars out as they go along, or if you're going to go around the outside and be perfectly fine.
That is great.
Do you remember what grid place you had for COTA?
For COTA, I believe it was 20th I was starting, so I had a really bad qualifying.
But you had 19 cars in front of you that
19,
any one of them makes a
yes.
mistake at that turn, and you got to figure that out.
And he's not
Yep.
at the back, so he's got plenty of cars behind him, pushing him into that turn.
Yes.
Oh, my gosh.
Being stuck right in the middle is probably the worst spot.
I think we see that with Formula One races. What was the race where Zhou Guan Yu had like qualied 4th or something, and then he bogged down at the start, and then just caused everybody behind him to have a nightmare start.
That is terrifying. Yeah, we've had a couple of stalled starts, and it's not that bad when it's the guy in front of you. But when it's the guy, two or three guys in front of you, and you don't see him coming up,
no.
that's when it's terrifying. Yeah, because that adds a whole nother aspect to the start.
What was your favorite race or track of the season?
Oof. I really loved Mid-Ohio. That was my first top 15 finish of the season, and there's just something about that track. It just flows so well, and it's got so much hill and camber change, and IndyCar races there, so that's always cool. So it's a really beautiful track. It's got so much character to it.
Was that the race where we heard something about a little transmission swap?
Oh, I don't remember.
Wasn't that WC?
It might have been.
Or not WC, but Endurance?
So I'll call it out.
Surprised.
I'll call it here. So you're partnered now with Rapscallion Motorsports, right?
Yes, sure
and
am.
I will say that they have been tremendous hosts to this podcast. They've opened our doors. That's where we're sitting right now and filming this. And so what's been your relationship like with them? How did you kind of meet them, get in the door with them? Basically, just if you were going to explain to somebody that wanted to get into what you're doing, how did you go about it?
So we actually had an unfortunate meeting for a first time, I'd say. I was out here racing. They're based in Crescent, Texas, at the Motorsport Ranch Crescent. And I was out here for a NASA club race, and a BMW decided not to turn left, not to turn right, but to go straight in the back of me.
All right.
So that wasn't too fun.
Rubbing
so
his racing.
That's NASCAR.
Who cares?
So I came putting my way back over here and came to the shop. They already had one of the same type of cars that I raced, the NASA prototype. They had one of those cars in here, which they use for the endurance racing. So I was like, hey, we're going to need this fixed up a little bit from that big old BMW. So that's actually how we met these guys. Unfortunate circumstances, but absolutely wonderful way it turned out. Everything happens for a reason. And honestly, at this point, couldn't be happier it did.
Yeah.
So with these guys, we had the car being fixed and everything. And then with that relationship, I figured out, oh, these guys do endurance racing. They compete in the World Racing League. So they go all over the country, and they do arrive and drive programs. So anyone can pay for an arrive and drive and be in one of their cars in an endurance race, which are typically 8 hours long and shared along 4 drivers. So you usually do about a 2-hour stint.
So that's kind of where I wanted to go next, was the endurance stuff. Was that that was the last race you had, or have you done something since then?
It was the last race I had, and I was in the NASA prototype in the GTU class at COTA.
That's so cool.
Walk us through that. How do you go from a guy that's doing gymnastics, going to college,
double major,
then
3
does
years,
club racing, then goes to F4, and now is endurance racing? What's the change like getting into the endurance side of things?
So I actually got introduced into the endurance side because we had a F4 race at Road America. And the weekend before, guess who was running? The World Racing League at Road America the weekend prior. Before that, I haven't seen Road America. I haven't been there, haven't driven it on the sim. So I was like, okay, well, I can get 2 hours minimum of track time the weekend prior. What better way to do that? You cannot beat it for the price to track time that you get on a race weekend. So that set me up, and that's how I started running endurance with these guys, was through that Road America race. And then we podiumed. We got a second place. Me and one other driver shared the car for a 7-hour race. I did 4 hours in the car that day, and man, was it intense, but I loved every second of it.
So correct me if I'm wrong. I think this is the story that Thomas was alluding to earlier. They had to pull your transmission out of the car that got slapped by the BMW.
Yes.
And they brought it to that race at Road America, correct?
Yes.
Tell me about that story.
So I don't know how far that track is. 18-hour drive, maybe? Well, we had transmission issues on Friday afternoon during the practice sessions. And we have one race Saturday, one race Sunday. So we're sitting here, the second gear, I think it was, blew. And we're trying to figure out where we can get a transmission. No one has one all up north.
I can imagine.
No one has spare transmissions. And I think the company that makes them was actually behind a bit as well, so they were even less likely. Well, with that BMW hitting me, I have the same car, the same transmission down here at this track in Crescent. Now, what's the problem? It's all the way down here in Crescent, Texas, and we're up in Plymouth, Wisconsin. So they tried to freight the engine that night, and the guys who was trying to freight it, his freight license, I guess is what it was, expired 2 days before. 2 days.
Of course it did.
They already had it packed up at the airport, ready for it to be shipped up there. So actually, these guys, this team, Rapscallion, put it in a car and had a couple of guys switch on the drive, and they drove it all the way up to Wisconsin.
Wow.
We got it back in the car Saturday afternoon, got it running, and ready for the race on Sunday. So I could not believe that these guys were able to put in that work and be able to do that for us to get in the car.
I mean, we talked about it throughout the day, but there's a community within the racing scene, and it kind of seems like you're feeling that out now, and you're kind of seeing how that works, where you're up in Wisconsin, you've got 2 or 3 events that you want to do, and kind of everybody back here at the garage is willing to kind of step up and help you get that done. Because again, you had 4 hours of track time thanks to that, pretty much. So somebody willing to drive 12, 15 hours, whatever it is, to get you 4 hours of track time is pretty sweet. Yeah,
it's astounding what goes behind the scenes for racing. Everything about the team is there's so much work you never see, and I want to be a part of that as well, because the team does everything so that the driver can get in the car and run that race. And in the grand scheme of things, it just looks like, okay, the driver's there to run that race. Nobody has any idea how much a race team actually goes through. So to be a part of that and really see how much these guys do is absolutely amazing.
That's awesome.
So obviously formula is the path that you want to go down. You want to stay in that as much as possible. But as far as this endurance scene, is that something that you want to continue to explore? Tell us a little bit about what your future is for endurance.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm not closing off any doors. My goal is purely to be a paid driver who can really make his place in this sport and put the team on podium. My whole thing that I just want to be is, like I was just talking about, the team puts so much work behind the scenes. I want to be a paid driver for a team because I want to be that one where the entire team puts in countless hours of work into the car, into the strategy, all of that, and they have all of their faith in me as a driver to put the entire team on the podium. That's where I want to be. That's where I want to end up. So it doesn't matter to me whether I make it to IndyCar, if I can make it to F1, if I can make it to WEC. I will take whatever routes available to me. Man, if I can be in a race car, that's a good time.
That's a sweet gig.
You can't complain about that. So that's my whole goal behind that. Yeah. I've been getting introduced into the endurance scene, so I've figured out, it's a totally different style of driving with a sports car, especially from a formula car like I talked about earlier, and also prototype cars. But like I said, it's a race car, man. No matter what I can get in, it's fun.
Can I ask real quick, so before he goes off the endurance thing, how long was a typical F4 race?
It's about 30 minutes.
Jeez.
Please explain to me what it's like going from a 30-minute all-out race, which at that point I guess feels like a sprint, to a 4-hour ordeal.
So that 30-minute race, it's like some people think, it's 30 minutes, it's not too long. Some people are like, oh, wow, 30 minutes in a car is a long time. It depends on the day. It depends on how you're feeling, how tired you are. But at the same time, since it is a sprint race and the race is only 30 minutes, you have to drive that car 110%
right
for 30 minutes straight. And once you start getting physically tired at that 20 minutes, well, then your mind starts to go. Well, you got to keep both running at the same time for 30 minutes straight. The car is sliding all the time, four-wheel drifting, trying to get into every corner. So it's very intense. And then on the other side, you have endurance racing, which you have to keep your mind on a dime for 2 hours, 4 hours, an hour and a half, however long your stint is. You have to keep that running at least 95% the whole time, because you also have to think, okay, well, if this endurance race is 8 hours and I'm in the first 2 hours, I still have to make the car last, not only through my 2 hours, but through the rest of the stint as well for these other drivers. So you want to keep it about 95%, because at COTA, I was the first one in the car for the WRL race, which was 8 hours long. I was in the first 2 hours, and I started pushing and pushing, sliding the car, and then I'm thinking, okay, wait, I'm the first 2 hours. This is just a little tad of what's going on in this race. I need to make sure this car is clean and good to go for these other racers behind me. So there's a lot more smart strategy in endurance racing. You have the time to make decisions. Okay, I'm running with this car in the same class. We're about even here, but I can take him on this corner. You have time to plan it out. In a sprint race, this guy made a mistake. I got to throw it in right now. So totally different attitude and mindset. But either way, it takes a lot of training and a lot of adaptability. That's for sure.
So we've seen what the visibility is in an open wheel car. Obviously in the Formula One car, it's completely open. You have your helmet on and you got, as much as you can look around in the visor. Mm-hmm. But we just got introduced to the endurance car here at the shop. And it's just basically a wraparound windshield, and you're sitting really low in this car. Tell us about the visibility differences. Is it harder to see in an endurance car, or what's that feel like?
Yeah, you can't really see the pavement in front of you. So,
oh my gosh.
But luckily, you should be keeping your eyes forward. But yeah, it is definitely different having that visibility, and especially in endurance racing, they'll have 5 different classes of cars out there. So in the NASA prototype, it's a much smaller prototype car, and it's much harder to see. But at the same time, it's like you have to present yourself so that others see you that are in these big old, let's say, BMWs or Supras or Mercedes.
Sure.
You have to really present yourself so that they see you too. So the visibility is harder. But also, at the same time, I guess you're not thinking about it too much.
That's fair.
What's been your favorite car or series to drive so far?
Oh, man. I will tell you here. I have tested in an F3 car for the FR Americas Championship, and just a taste of that car. Different different breed to drive that thing. The skill level from a jump to F4 to F3 is absolutely shocking. But absolute blast to drive. That thing has ridiculous aerodynamics and downforce and 300 horsepower, and it weighs like nothing. So it takes off like a rocket when that turbo hits.
We talked about earlier outside before we started this podcast, we talked about kind of the differences between the Formula 4 car and the Formula 3 car. Is there any way you can go more in depth on that, just the difference and I guess how the car feels, how the handling is, the braking, everything involved?
Yeah, so they're changing the F4 car series. They just made a new Ligier chassis coming forward. So the car will act a bit different. But from what I've had this year, the F4 car, I guess the best way to explain it is it drives like a go-kart almost. That's really, fair. Really big go-kart.
Okay.
So you can still throw it into the corners a lot. You can trail brake. And it's very, very kind to what you're doing to it. Now, the F3 car with twice the horsepower and much more aerodynamic, it's a different style of driving. So you have to get used to, like, your brake trace. The way you brake in an aerodynamic car is going to be much different than a sports car.
Sure.
So the more downforce you have, the more dramatic that change is going to be in your braking. So that was something to really get used to and really figure out, I guess, is a big brake difference. And then you have to be much kinder to turning that thing in, and especially much kinder to getting on the power because, man, when that turbo spools on, it is an instantaneous kick.
Goodness.
So it drives a lot more as a downforce race car, whereas the F4 car is more of a go-kart. Fling it around and make that thing slide.
If you could give advice to somebody that might watch that wants to follow what you're doing, how would you tell them to do it?
Well, for one, you can reach out to me. I don't mind telling you know what's going on, how I got through it and everything. But at the same time, it's finding a balance of everything because you can easily overwork yourself. You can easily try to do too much. I was doing school as I started my F4 career, and luckily I was at the end of my college time. So I was able to really just kind of tidy up the other things while I was starting to focus harshly on the F4 US stuff. So it's a lot of balance and getting used to things, making a schedule. Everyone always says make a schedule. That is the way to do it. And as well, if you have someone that's got a similar interest, like, you two both started a podcast, right? You can keep each other in check. You can keep each other
right. Do.
You do. So, if you have someone that has a similar interest and a similar drive, 100% have that person stick with you. If you can grow with somebody, that is the best way to do it, in my opinion.
That's awesome. And would you say, so I know you did like the club route and all that, would you encourage people just to go out and find ways where they can drive? Or would you say, no, you have to do karting or you have to do club racing, or is it just get out and drive?
So it's really extremely difficult to just jump into the professional scene,
right?
Even though F4 is, the beginning of the ladder on the way up. Now, I would definitely advise getting some experience. If you can just get into a car and just drive it out on the racetrack, they have them all over the country where you can just take your own car out on the racetrack just to experience it. If you can do that and learn vehicle dynamics, how weight shifts on a car when you're braking, how it leans when you're turning, if you can do all of that just to get an introduction to it, or do like club racing like I did and get some taste of what it's like being wheel to wheels with someone going through a turn at 90 miles an hour and having to pay attention to flag stands, other cars on the track, incident, possible oil spill or debris that might appear on track at the same time. Getting yourself used to that and introduced to that is one of the best things to do before you fully jump in, commit to it, and put all that time and money into it, because it will take up all of your time, which isn't a bad thing. But it will take up a lot of money, which might be a bad thing.
I think whenever we first started watching Formula One and stuff, we were just blown away by like the money that goes into it.
Absolutely.
I mean, especially Formula One, because it's, we're talking millions and billions of dollars.
Millions of dollars.
Hundreds of millions. Yeah, it's insane.
And so it everywhere starts. But we've seen a lot of places, even here, where they're trying to be more open, more receptive, trying to find more easier ways for people to come in without such a burden placed on them immediately. Hey, you don't have to go $500,000 in debt to try this.
Exactly, yeah. There's also like a lot of stuff like Rapscallion team does, arrive and drive.
Yeah.
If you can find a team that does arrive and drive, then that's a really good way to get introduced to it. Also because, one, it's not your car. So you don't have to worry about, oh my gosh, my wheel just fell off. I got to go home and fix it in my garage and figure out how to do this with my buddy for 6 hours in the garage.
That's fair.
But it's a really good way to get introduced to it with an arrive and drive with the team, because they have the car, they have the setup, they will walk you through it, they will teach you, they will coach you, and you get every bit of the action I was talking about. You know, you get introduced to the wheel-to-wheel racing. You get introduced to how do you do it? What does it take to do it? And having that team behind you and that help really helps you get introduced to the scene a lot faster than also just doing karting on your own.
So you're actually also able to drive around with somebody and coach them. You have that certification or whatever it is to be able to do that. Have you had to do that before?
I have. So I'm an instructor with the National Auto Sports Association, NASA, as well as Porsche Club of America.
Nice.
So whenever I was just racing with my dad, I got my instructor license, and I was able to hop in the car with a couple of people and help coach them and teach them the ropes of what's happening, what's going on, what your car's supposed to do. That's also really good to get introduced to, because whenever you join these regular clubs and you just run your own car, they usually put an instructor with you. So, you know, you've got someone sitting right there in your passenger seat with you, seeing how the car reacts, and tells you, hey, you know, you can carry 20 more miles an hour into the turn, or hey, that was a bit terrifying. We need to we need to hang on.
Would you compare it to, like, so somebody tries to go to the gym for the first time and they're just so intimidated they have to get like a trainer, they have to get somebody that shows them the ropes. Otherwise, you're not going to have the full fun experience of what the car can do if you don't know what to do with it.
Yes, that is a really great comparison too. And like what I said earlier, you know, if you have a buddy with you to grow with that, that is a fantastic comparison.
That's awesome. Start thinking of your question now.
Oh.
So last thing I was going to ask you, and of course you can use this as a platform to talk about whatever you want, but without giving too much away or anything, what's on the horizon for Landan Lim? What are you looking forward to in your racing career, short term and long term?
So long term, like I said earlier, I want to be a paid driver for a team who really puts everything they've got in me so that I can put the team on podium. That is the ultimate goal. That is what I want to be. I want to have a place in motorsports. And then short term, I'm assuming we're talking 2024.
Whatever you can say
in a couple
or not
of days,
say.
actually.
Whatever you're allowed to say.
So I am not allowed to say a couple of things.
Fair
but
enough.
I will tell you that come around next week, I will be having one announcement coming up for a series I'm joining. Very, very extremely excited for. And that series is actually being used in preparation for another series.
Oh,
so
wow. Curveball.
That will be happening in 2024 in a couple of days soon. And as well as those happening, I am looking to be a full-time driver for Rapscallion Motorsports in the WRL series. So looking to have a taste of the endurance, which I've gotten a taste of this year, but looking to really grow in the endurance racing world as well as whatever the other two are happening. So that's what we'll put out
awesome.
there.
Yeah, we'll be looking forward to all the news. We'll share it when it comes across our feeds and everything. We always like to end these. I don't know how this started, but I think Jeremiah might have a question for you.
It's not really for him. It's more for the audience.
Okay.
And it's not a good one. Guys, if you think I could get out on track right now and take Landan head to head, put him in the dust, I don't know if I agree with you. But we'll find out.
Landan, we can't thank you enough for your friendliness and hospitality. Your family, Rapscallion, has been great showing us around. We look forward to hopefully continuing a relationship with you and following you through your career. And we wish you nothing but the best. But thanks for hopping on.
Yeah, I'm sure I'll see you guys soon.
Absolutely.
All right, we'll see you.
Bye.